Alright, we're going to start by working on our finals review, Chapitre 1.1 today. But before we get started, let's look at some general study tips. First, the most important thing to remember is that Madame Brenner is not here to take the test for you. You are the only person responsible for learning this information. Things like, you weren't here in class today, or we didn't practice in class the way that I like to practice. Those are not excuses, and it will not help you on the final to use that as a way to get out of studying. Promise you, I already know this stuff. I'm here to help you learn this stuff. But my job is not to follow you home and force it down your throat. Whether you do well on this or not is up to you and your own level of personal responsibility. With that in mind, here are a few more specific studying tips. It's always best to practice everything in context. A lot of us have a tendency to revert to studying techniques that work well for us in other classes, like flashcards or sitting at home and reading through the textbook again. That works pretty well for some classes, like maybe your English class or your science class, but is not effective for learning foreign language. Your brain always processes language in a context. So being able to put together a word with a conversation or a cultural context in a situation, that's what's going to be able to help your brain figure out what's going on in French. It's not that flashcards and things like that can't be useful, but being able to put it together is more the way that your brain works. Similarly, we need to study in intense but short bursts. Your brain likes a lot of language, and then it needs a little bit of a break in order to process all of that information you just fed into it. So, pick an amount of time between about 10 and 20 minutes. I do 15 because it's really easy to time. Spend the first 15 minutes being super focused. Don't let anything distract you. Try to do as much as you possibly can in those 15 minutes and take on the hardest things that you can think of. Once that 15-minute timer goes off, then put it aside, don't even think about it, take a 15-minute break. Do whatever it is you feel like. Play a game, watch YouTube videos, check Twitter, check Facebook, check Instagram, harass your brother, whatever it is you want to do, go do something else for 15 minutes. This is actually going to be way more effective than spending 30 minutes trying but kind of only paying attention and not really caring. Finally, remember that we don't expect you to be a fluent speaker. A lot of you are still getting scared by the authentic materials. Trust me, I know that you can't handle this yet. It's kind of like throwing a college-level textbook at an elementary school kid. I know you're not ready, but I've never asked you to be. Think about the questions that we ask. We ask things like, is this word somewhere in this page? Or name something that they're talking about. We've never once asked for word-for-word translations. So, those of you who are getting scared off by that, let it go. We're not asking you to be perfect. You're not supposed to be at this point. Focus on the skills that you do have and try to understand as much as you can. That's the only thing we're doing here. We want to measure how much you understand. It's not going to be 100%, but it's not supposed to be. Similarly, don't get scared off by the conversation and the writing portions. Many of you are focusing so hard on trying to do everything totally perfectly that you've lost the focus, which is simply communicating your idea. If I can figure out what it is you're trying to say, but you're saying a lot of cool things, that's way more important to me than the fact that your grammar's a little bit off, or that you forgot to make that adjective agree, or maybe you messed up the gender on a noun. I'm not looking for 100% perfect. Alright, to focus in on Chapitre 1.1. This is actually probably one of the easiest sections in the entire semester. There's not much grammar, and it's almost all entirely prescriptive vocabulary phrases, plus the ability to count to 30. It's important that you know that culture is not tested directly. So, for example, you will never have a question that says, is to singular or plural, or formal or informal? However, it is implied. So, for example, if the beginning of your sentence starts with to, and you have to fill in a word at the end of the sentence, you will be expected to know that the word that goes at the end of the sentence should also be informal to match the informality of to. So, you won't have a direct question about it, but it's expected that you know how to do those things in context. The one thing that does not appear on the final in any way, shape, or form are the gestures. All right, so let's start by looking at some grammar. So, a few grammar terms that are important to know. The subject of a sentence is the person or thing being discussed in that sentence. It's usually one of the very first words, if not the very first word. And it's always a noun. A verb is either the action that person or thing did, which is the way most of us think about verbs, or it can also be a word that describes a state that person or thing was in. This is a really important second definition because that's why words like is are still considered verbs. Is not an action. To say, he is tall, there's no action in that sentence. However, being tall is the state that he is in. So the is helping us connect those two things, the person and the state of being tall. Therefore, it still counts as a verb. A pronoun is a word which replaces a noun to avoid repetition. And therefore, a subject pronoun is a pronoun which can be used as the subject of a sentence. We use these all the time, we just don't think about it. Bob is tall. Bob is nice. Bob is old. Bob is 76. Bob lives in Florida. So on and so forth. It sounds much more natural to replace some of those Bobs with he. Bob is tall. He is also nice. You will not be asked to define any of these on your final. However, you will be expected to identify them. So, for example, if I give you the sentence, Je m'appelle Brittany, it might ask you to identify what the subject pronoun is of that sentence. Je. Here are the 9 French subject pronouns in their proper order. We have je, tu, il, elle, on, nous, vous, il, and elle. Tu and vous differ from each other in 2 ways. Remember that tu is singular and vous is plural. So anytime you have one person, you'll use tu. If you have 2 or more people, you can use vous. However, remember that tu is also informal and vous is formal. So speaking to a single friend, you could use tu. Speaking to a group of teachers, we have to use vous. Remember that vous always wins out over tu. So if you have a combination, like say you have a plural but informal situation, like you're talking to a group of your friends, you'll always use vous. Similarly, il and elle only differ based on gender. They both mean they, but il is a group of guys and elle is a group of girls. A mixed group, a group with both guys and girls, will always take the masculine form, il. All right, and then finally counting. The fact of the matter is that 0 through 20 must simply be memorized. There's nothing else that we can do for counting. After that, we can start thinking about the pattern. Remember that all of our ones, so 21, 31, 41, 51, etc., will include the word a. 21, literally 20 and 1. However, 22 through 29 will do the exact same thing that they do in English. We'll get rid of the a and we'll just say 22, 23, 24, 25, so on and so forth. However, in French, to show that we've taken out that a, we are going to write them with a hyphen. 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, etc. Once you remember this pattern, then all you need to know is the tens digit. So you have 20 is 20, 30 is 30, 40, 40, 50, 50, 60. However, be aware that you cannot count above 69 with this pattern. 70 through 99 really have their own pattern, and it's totally separate from this one.